forgotten the magic word welcome in Swahili, but would like to greet you all anyway. I will immediately start with my lecture. I had to shorten, which I had to shorten. It will have 3 shorter parts. I will start with religion and religiosity as a resource in times of crisis. People's religiosity plays an important role in times of crisis. It shapes their for people. It shapes their beliefs and behaviors. Whether it is a natural disaster, war, pandemic, or economic crisis, people tend to turn to their faith to comfort, guidance, and strength. Religion is viewed as a source of hope and meaning during difficult times. Individuals search for comfort in prayer and spiritual practices. Many studies have shown that people with a strong religious faith tend to experience less anxiety, stress, and depression during times of crisis. My research among Croatian adolescents conducted during the coronavirus pandemic has shown that the faith of religious adolescents became more personal and that it had a positive effect on psychosocial resilience and personal growth, but in combination with family cohesion, which was stimulated by religiosity, that has influenced personal growth. Other psychological research also indicates that practice religiosity is a predictor of young people's mental health and resilience. This is particularly because active religious affiliation is linked to finding meaning in life and experiencing a sense of community. Recently, a growing number of children and young people have been experiencing mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, as well as behavioral disorders. And there has been an increase in suicides among this age group. Parents and teachers often fail to recognize the symptoms. All of this suggests that we need to foster hope and resilience in children and young people to help them cope with life's difficulties and disappointments. Hope is a powerful motivator that contributes to life satisfaction, well-being, health, and success. It helps individuals find the path to their goals. However, hope is born in relationships, which it simultaneously builds and preserves. Hope is born in relationships, and it simultaneously builds and preserves these relationships, thus contributing to resilience. Therefore, hope is an important determinant of positive development in children and young people. Numerous studies confirm that religiosity is a strong impetus for hope. Due to the supernatural dimension inherent in Christian hope, it enables one to endure suffering, an inevitable part of transformation. Constitutive elements of hope are activity and the power to shape and reshape life. Although hope always involves a tension between what one can expect and what transcends one's efforts and expectations. Now I will pass to the second part, the contribution of education, school and religious education in conveying hope and resilience. In the history of education and pedagogy, suffering was always perceived as problematic, as the suffering caused by human will or guilt, which means by moral evil, so the suffering caused by what philosophers of religion call physical and metaphysical evil, that results from natural disasters or is a consequence of the frailty and transience of man and the imperfection of everything created. The religious philosophical question of the where from and why of evil and suffering is answered differently in different religions and philosophies. In Christianity, those questions turn into the question, where is God in human suffering, as Jürgen Moltmann pointed out. This question is ultimately answered by the love of God for humanity and creation shown in Jesus Christ, who took on the suffering to his being, becoming vulnerable himself, to overcome pain and transform death into resurrection and eternal life. In religious education, skewed interpretations of God's relation to the suffering of humans and other creatures led to skewed images of God and can cause new suffering, while right theological answers and images can become a source of hope and strength, helping to overcome evil and suffering. Educators and educationalists have always believed that children's tender souls should be protected from suffering, not only from enduring suffering, but also from having to look at suffering. At the same time, they are aware that no one, not even the youngest members of the human community, can be protected from suffering. Therefore, children and young people should be helped to understand the inevitable suffering as something that is part of life, to accept it, and to process the experiences of suffering. Children and young people should be strengthened with the motives of hope and confidence that good will ultimately win, so that they can face suffering in the best possible way and overcome the suffering that cannot be avoided. All cultures have stories and fairy tales that pass on to new generations the truth about life and death, suffering and hope, sorrow and joy. So are children from an early age confronted with thoughts about life and its questions, especially the question of suffering caused by the blows of fate, loss, injustice, humiliation, and fear. All these questions are wrapped up in the garb of fairy tales. But children also come across thoughts about what we can and should hope for, which help them to cope with the suffering and hope for a good end. Since the perception of reality is largely shaped by culture and therefore depends on how we co-construct and experience it, human society tries to help its young members cope with life and remove the obstacles on the path of life. School, as a prominent educational institution in society, promotes reflection on suffering and hope as a fundamental human and religious experience. It initiates discussion of these topics through many school subjects and extracurricular activities and content, dealing with the topic of suffering and overcoming it, opening the horizons of hope, and building trust in the victory of good are taught to students in language and literature teaching, the visual arts, music and film arts, history, philosophy, ethics, psychology, sociology, and religion. Confessional religious education contributes to achieving the school's goals by addressing these questions from the perspective of a specific religion or Christian denomination. As teachers of life, religions offer a semantic potential comprising a world of images, metaphors, narratives, words, and identification figures that mediates ideas and patterns of action. This potential must be continually disclosed by each generation through both upbringing and education. Dealing with the topic of suffering, experience, and anxiety and reasons for hope and resilience in religious education includes both cognitive and emotional levels and can therefore help to overcome stress. In my analysis of the textbooks for Catholic religious education in primary and secondary schools in Croatia, from the point of view of representation of suffering and hope, it was evident that the textbooks have shown that suffering and different causes had different causes and many faces. Religious pedagogical discourse about suffering and hope follows the possibilities and developmental questions problems and needs of the students of the respective age group. They try to establish the correlation between human experience and the experience of faith. The students are helped to come to terms with suffering and to gain motivation for hope. Viewed from a theological perspective, suffering is largely viewed in the light of God's plan of salvation and Christ's paschal mystery, whereby even in the suffering, the hope for the victory of life comes into effect. It is recognizable that Christian hope is not the same as optimism or positive thinking. Hope is anchored in the love of God, which became visible in Jesus Christ and was experienced by people. Trust in God, who will ultimately direct everything for the good, allows us to see the goal and inspires appropriate behavior. In textbooks for high school, there is a stronger connection of the themes with contemporary social life and a more pronounced meta-reflection on the topics of suffering and hope in the Christian faith as well as in general human and religious experience. And my third and last point, towards the communal dimension of hope. Ultimately, the educational system is oriented toward the future, inherently filled with the hope that educational processes will benefit students and contribute to their growth and development. From a Christian perspective, hope in education and society is fostered to building on the assumption that something new can happen beyond human effort, though never without it. Christian education participates in creating an endless dynamic of hope that transcends the human sphere in this life. Religious education generates hope by offering an alternative approach to societal problems to that of the media, which often promotes sensationalism and highlights disasters. The great Brazilian educational thinker, Paulo Freire, promoted in his numerous writings and especially in his Pedagogy of Hope from 1994, the political dimension of education. He requested an education that turns away from a banking concept in which learners are understood as receivers of information to an educational approach that is connected to the lives of learners and grounded in an understanding of the current social and political situation in a certain society. Since neoliberalism still dominates not only economies but also much of policy making and practices around the world, Douglas Byrne noted the continuing topicality of Freire's reminder about the danger that hope could be caught by neoliberal ideals of individualism, self-improvement, and private notions of getting ahead. Freire's followers, Henri Giraud, speaks about educated hope that engages the imagination and includes civic engagement. Educated hope combines the pedagogical and the political in ways that stress the contextual nature of learning, emphasizing that different contexts give rise to diverse questions, problems, and possibilities. Dave Hicks suggests several steps on how to make hope practical in education and learning. These steps are sharing, that means creating spaces where young people can share their feelings about an issue or problem. Listening, which means really listening to what students wish to say about an issue. Understanding the nature of the problem, its origin, impacts, and consequences, as well as the action being taken to help or change the situation, and acting. This way, learning can be transformative. Education needs new narratives that can help social, political, and economical forces around the world to support each other and work together rather than competing with each other. In religious education, the ideas of the pedagogy of hope and its social dimension can be productively connected to the theology of communion and transmitted into a spirituality of communion and social engagement from faith that generates hope. Upbringing and education as an open process is imbued with hope. As a didactic principle, hope points to an educational dialogue with others. In this dialogue, one's identity becomes exposed to others. Dialogue invites individuals to reveal the uniqueness and distinctiveness of their lives and existence. This distinctiveness is expressed through authentic human communication. The paradigm for such self-disclosure can be found in a biblical experience where a person responds to God's call with, "Here I am." This response contains the uniqueness of each person and every vocation. Mutual addressing connects us as people in the deepest sense, as individuals who are directed towards one another despite our existential differences, which simultaneously make us vulnerable. Through dialogue, education becomes a process of growing in shared humanity. Religious education encourages people to ask questions about meaning. Those who ask such questions are always on a journey. They are travelers, viators, as St. Thomas Aquinas said. Students should be encouraged to approach life's journey not as tourists consuming various experience, but as contemplative pilgrims engaging in conversation with others and processing their impressions slowly. It is precisely the unusual things and contradictions encountered along the way that stimulate processes of learning, reconstruction, and transformation. Contemplative learning in encounter with tradition is also encouraged by the African promoters of the inculturation of religious education that I know, such as Gaston Oguikosi, Beatrice Kurum, Mary Getui, Jean-Paul Nguema, and many others. An analysis of the religious education curriculum and textbooks in my own home country of Croatia reveals that in terms of its goals and content, religious education provides abundant opportunities to nurture hope in all its dimensions. However, the extent to which these opportunities are realized depends on the actions, approaches, and methods of teachers. Nevertheless, even the most creative teaching methods can guarantee the outcome, as the eschatological dimension of hope always come into play. After all, even after we have done everything in our power, much still does not depend on us as teachers. As Jesus says in his parables of Kingdom of God, man scattered seed, and it sprouts, grows, and bears fruit on its own accord. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Anna, and may we appreciate her contribution. Our second keynote speaker is Professor Anthony Alaba. He is the Vice Chancellor, Augustine University, Lagos, Nigeria, but due to unavoidable circumstances, Father Barrow is going to present his paper. Father Barrow, the topic of the presentation is on the Catholic education and promotion of human dignity in Africa. He has maximum of 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor began by saying new models of cars appear every year in the market and on highways. But they do not just appear, for cars are designed and manufactured, and new buildings envisioned and constructed bearing in mind their ed users. In the same way, education is to be envisioned bearing in mind its human recipient. Now, since authentic development is centered on the human person, as Pope Paul VI wrote in his landmark Encyclical Populorum Progressio, education as means of human development is or must be centered on its human recipient. In practical terms, an adequate notion of education must flow from an adequate understanding of the human person. Adequacy in this respect does not necessarily mean a perfect understanding of the notion we use. Our notions may, and in fact will be imperfect to the extent that they do not, at any given time, represent a perfect apprehension of the totality of what it placed before us to understand. Nonetheless, if we are not to incarcerate our minds in the jail house of skepticism, which is a self-refuting philosophical stance, we must start out with the admission that what is imperfectly asserted is not necessarily invalid. Imperfection of our understanding does not invalidate the limited understanding we have. Considering the imperative of seeing education as centered on the human person, who is its recipient, the trajectory of this paper moves from a philosophical and theological anthropology to a philosophy and theology of education. I shall begin with a brief exploration into what two towering figures in Catholic intellectual tradition, namely Augustine of Hippo and Thomas Aquinas, say to us about the human person in his or her dignity before drawing implication for Catholic education. Augustine was an African in early Christianity, yet his Africanness does not go unquestioned. He wrote in Latin, which is not an African language. His thought pattern showed him as a disciple of Plato, and Plato was not an African philosopher. Similarly, Aquinas was not African. He wrote in Latin to deploy the resources of Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, to explain the Christian faith. It is therefore right and fitting that I make an apologia, by which I mean not a word spoken in defense of Augustine and Aquinas, but a word spoken in their favor, an apologia. I bear in mind that in these days of advocacy of epistemic decolonization in African scholarly circles, there is a strong and seemingly irresistible temptation on the part of some to dismiss thinkers like Augustine and Aquinas as two dead white European males whose ideas would perpetuate colonization of the African mind rather than liberate it. However, if Africans are not to end up in epistemic incarceration in time and in space, a colonial past and its ravages, rather than make us dismiss ideas of non-African thinkers, should inspire us to differentiate to a differentiated acceptance or rejection of ideas in space and time. From the temporal perspective, like the wise scribe who brings from his storeroom things old and new, Africans need to synthesize what has been inherited from the past with new things learned in the present. From the spatial perspective, Africans need to prudently receive or reject what has come from the encounter between African and non-African cultures. In a nutshell, education is enriched in the encounter between time and in an encounter of cultures. It is such that the really cultured man or woman of today must have encountered many cultures, and the really educated man or woman of today must be conversant with the ideas in their times and what they say to our time. But if these considerations inform my choice of these two great thinkers, what can we learn from them? Augustine on human dignity as triadic reflection of God. The philosophical and theological anthropology of the African pastor and doctor St. Augustine of Hippo provides a starting point of discussing human dignity. His commentary on the creation narrative of the book of Genesis includes his interpretation of the assertion of the narrator that God created human beings in his image and likeness. Scholars have pointed out a multiplicity of meaning in his treatment of this biblical datum. Yet, it would not be less than exact to assert that for Augustine of Hippo, the dignity of the human person is rooted in his creation in the image and likeness of God. In his retro commentary on the book of Genesis, the Genesi ad Literarum, written around 388, 395, Augustine explains that man occupies a preeminent position among God's other creatures, and that this preeminence lies rather in the fact that God made him to his own image, unquote. The preeminence of man consists in this, that God made him to his own image by giving him an intellect by which he surpasses the beasts. Given this honor, if man does not understand it and live a good life in accordance with it, he will be on a level with the same beasts over which he has been placed. If therefore he himself formed man from the earth and the beast from the earth, what is the basis of man's greater dignity except that he was created in the image of God? This was not, however, in his body, but in his intellect. End of quote. Human dignity is the image and likeness of God in man. The image of God in man is his rational soul, which reflects God through man's intellect and will. The likeness of God in man is the alignment of human will to God, an alignment which becomes feasible in man's life of virtue. Augustine was convinced that the image of God in the human being is triadic. In each gender, male and female, in the imprint of God manifest in being, knowing, and willing. Human dignity manifests itself in the human person's natural capacity to know, to will, to love, and be loved. At creation, God gifted the human person with his imprint. But this gift is also a task. The human being must assume the task of living in a way that corresponds to the gift. The image of God in the human person is thus a gift and a task. He is the image of God, and he must live according to what he is. In relating with himself and with others, the human person's capacity to know the truth, his capacity to make good choices, and his capacity to love and be loved must reflect this divine imprint by being ordered to God by God. Sin is failure to assume this responsibility, an abdication of responsibility that defaces the image of God in man, even if it does not obliterate it. After his treatment of the topic in his retro commentary of the book of Genesis, Augustine's philosophical and theological anthropology of imprint of God's image in the human person would also find an echo in his allegorical interpretation of the book of Genesis. This allegorical interpretation would inspire and encourage Augustine to seek to understand the divine and omnipotent Trinity by looking for the image of God in human person. Thus, in his Confessions, a work he was preoccupied with between 397 and 400, that is, just before embarking on writing the Trinitate, Augustine wrote, and I quote, "Who can understand the omnipotent Trinity? Yet everyone speaks about the subject. If indeed it can be matter of discourse. It is a rare soul who knows what he is talking about when he is speaking of it. People debate and quarrel, and without peace, no one sees that vision. I wish that human disputants would reflect upon the triad within their own selves. These three aspects of the self are very different from the Trinity. But I may make the observation that on this triad, they would well exercise their minds and examine the problem, thereby becoming aware how far distant they are from it. The three aspects I mean are being, knowing, and willing. For I am, and I know, and I will. Knowing and willing, I am. I know that I am, and I will. I will to be and to know. End of quote. The image of God in man, reflected in the triad of being, knowing, and willing, has been blurred, but not erased by sin. It needs to be restored. That is why the search for the Trinity in man is the task of restoration of the image of God in man and through the path of conversion. Augustine's philosophical and theological anthropology of human dignity in its Imago Dei is consistent with his philosophy of education as enunciated in this dialogue of free will. Augustine, asked by his interlocutor, Evodius, whether evil was something learned, responded in terms that clearly disassociate education from moral depravity. Education is the ordering of our rational, volitional, and affective powers by God to God. To stray from the path of education is to refuse to have these same powers ordered by God to God. In other words, evil is committed not by learning, but by turning away from learning. In the submission of the great Bishop of Hippo, quote, it is at least manifest that since learning is good, evil cannot be learned. If it is learned, it must be a part of education, and education will not be good. But as you yourself, Evodius, admit, it is good. Evil, therefore, is not learned. And it is vain to ask from whom we have learned to do evil. Or, if indeed evil is learned, that can only be in the sense that we learn to avoid deeds which ought not to be done. Hence, to do evil is nothing but to stray away from education. End of quote. This submission of St. Augustine is what we find beautifully encapsulated in the motto of Augustine's University, Proscientia et Moribus. Education is for learning and character. You cannot have one without the other. A truly learned person cannot be of good character. Education and moral depravity cannot be found in one and the same person, unless perhaps we are dealing with schizophrenic. The university graduates today, perhaps more than ever before, would be incomplete. All a split personality if he or she were to acquire technical competence bereft of ethical competence. Inasmuch as our developmental needs in Africa require the formation of technocrats, authentic development will be nothing but a fleeting illusion if we were to form technocrats without ethical competence. Unwholesome behavior is antithetical to education. And the Catholic University is not reducible to a mere certificate factory. The bearer of her certificate must be a man or woman of integrity, having graduated from a university that promotes integral humanism by promoting the integrity of education. For Augustine, human dignity lies in the human capacity to know and love God. The role of education is to promote human dignity by being an instrument through which God orders the powers that constitute the image of God in the human person to God himself, an instrument used to actualize the human capacity to know, and love God. Human dignity is thus promoted by learning but violated where learning is impeded. Yet, there is a caveat. The caveat is necessary because the integrity of education itself is violated by a philosophy of education that would reduce education to education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, having lost sight of the ethical intent and content of education. Respect for the integrity of education is the recognition of the ethical intent and content of education. Education today is reduced to knowledge without wisdom, to acquisition of knowledge or temporal and changing things with little or no regard to the contemplative dimension of human existence. Its purpose is to serve the economy understood as management of production, distribution, and consumption in a world ruled by the dictatorship of science, technology, and market forces. Thomas Aquinas on human dignity. Thomas Aquinas' reflection on human dignity is an echo of his reading of Augustine's commentary on Genesis 1:26 through the lenses of Aristotelian philosophy. Whereas in Augustine, one finds a Neoplatonist Christian philosopher who was a pastor and occasional writer. In Thomas Aquinas, one finds a schoolman who read Plato and Augustine through the lenses of Aristotle and offered a systematized synthesis of Neoplatonist Augustine and Aristotle. Aquinas explains the image of God in man by asserting that the image of God is in the human soul, in its rationality and will. In his words, quote, "It is manifest that in man there is some likeness to God, copied from God as from an exemplar. Yet this likeness is not one of equality, for such an exemplar infinitely excels its copy. Therefore, there is in man a likeness to God, not indeed a perfect likeness, but imperfect. And Scripture implies the same when it says that man was made to God's likeness. For proposition to signifies a certain approach as of something at a distance. The nuanced articulation of this position on this subject matter is to be noted. It is to the effect that human likeness to God is imperfect because no creature can be a perfect representation of the Creator. The only perfect image of God is God's firstborn Son, because according to the Nicene Creed, he is of the same nature as God. The human person, therefore, conforms to this perfect image that the firstborn Son is only by way of grace. Professor continues on to discuss St. Thomas and the position of St. Thomas on human dignity. Let me move to what he has said about Catholic education and human dignity. In order to draw lesson about Catholic education from what has been learned in our brief foray into the philosophical and theological anthropology of Augustine and Thomas of Aquinas, it is necessary to clarify what is meant here by Catholic education. Education is not Catholic simply because it is taking place within a school established and administered by any agency that lays claim to Catholic affiliation. It is Catholic first and foremost because it respects both the integrity of education and the integrity of the human person created in the image and likeness of God. Here, etymology comes to guide our steps and offers assistance in our quest for conceptual clarification. And he underlines that it is Catholic because it focuses on the whole person and looks at all the dimensions of the human person who enjoys that dignity of God. You'll be able to see the whole paper once it is shared. Therefore, let me go to the conclusion of what he has said about the whole discourse. The human quest for good is a quest for the infinite. This is the conclusion. That is why the human being is restless. The infinite good is the highest good, who is God. For this reason, underlying the ethical intent of education, or formation of the intellect and will, is its religious and theological intent. Education then forms the whole person and prepares the human person for holistic participation in the in the transformation of human society. Therefore, he concludes that education that is Catholic must adhere to the formation of the total person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father Barrow. Please pass our regards to Professor Alaba, and we appreciate their contribution. As we continue, I continue to insist we try to respect the time. I do not want to cut the conversation, but at the same time, I would like to be also fair to the others. So kindly, it's 15 minutes for the next presenter, and the others will be 7 minutes, the following ones. For now, we have Bishop Ernesto Magwengwe. He is the Bishop of Inhabane, all the way from Mozambique. Bishop, karibu sana. His topic reads, African Compact on Education, from the culture of death to the culture of life, role of the pontifical pedagogy. Askofu, karibu.
Faço premissa, a primeira premissa é que falo em português, quero garantir que esteja traduzido. There is a translation.
Do you have the translations? Can you hear? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
A segunda premissa é que mudei um pouco o título. Cultura da morte. Utilizei uma expressão de Erich Fromm que é necrofilia. E a cultura da vida é biofilia. Então, vou usar estes termos, passar da necrofilia para biofilia. A terceira premissa, se depois de 5 minutos não entenderem nada, então, por favor de levantar as mãos e vamos dedicar os outros 10 minutos para descansar. Bom, a minha comunicação propõe o filocentrismo dialético integral. É um novo termo, não é neologismo, biofilocentrismo dialético integral como paradigma epistemológico pedagógico africano para responder ao Pacto Educativo Global. E argumento que a educação colonial impôs uma estrutura necrofílica, isto é, orientada para a morte, o controle e a fixidez, cujo legado gerou feridas profundas no tecido cognitivo, estético e social do continente. O medo, portanto, o medo do próprio pensamento, o que chamo nosofobia, a rejeição da própria beleza, o que chamo de misocalia, e o medo da diversidade, que chamo mixofobia, e o afropessimismo duplo, que combina a desumanização externa com a introjeção interna da inferioridade. Contra este legado da educação colonial, proponho uma metanoia entendida não como simples mudança de opinião, mas como conversão estrutural da inteligência e da sensibilidade rumo ao biofilocentrismo, isto é, a centralização normativa da vida como critério supremo da educação. Este paradigma é o reconhecimento filosófico explícito daquilo que a África sempre foi em sua sabedoria ancestral. O Ubuntu, Mati, a força vital, Bantu e pedagogias comunitárias, integrando conhecimento, ética, estética e espiritualidade. Portanto, a centralidade da vida não é uma novidade. Já na África tradicional, existe esta centralidade da vida. Tudo aquilo que é feito na África é para potenciar a vida. Então, a partir desta reorientação, ofereço 6 virtudes restaurativas, que depois no texto vou explicar: a nosofilia, a filocália, a mixofilia, crítica, compaixão política, diplomacia biofílica e esperança ativa, capazes de curar feridas coloniais e demonstrar que a África não apenas pode se reerguer soberanamente, mas também pode oferecer ao mundo uma alternativa vital à lógica destrutiva que domina o paradigma atual. Então, o ponto 1, como introdução, o Pacto Educativo Global, convocado por Sua Santidade o Papa Francisco em 2019, convida a humanidade a uma reconstrução planetária do tecido educativo por meio de uma aliança entre governos, instituições, famílias, religiões e sociedade civil. Ao chegar à África, este Pacto Educativo Global encontra um continente marcado por feridas históricas profundas, desigualdades estruturais persistentes e potencialidades únicas, sabedorias ancestrais como Ubuntu e Mati, demografias jovens e capacidade notável de resiliência frente às crises planetárias, que o cardeal Fridolin esta manhã falou das oportunidades. A recepção africana do pacto não pode ser passiva, deve ser uma tradução criativa capaz de transformar o próprio pacto enquanto transforma a África, oferecendo soluções que o Ocidente, aprisionado em sua lógica necrofílica, sozinho não consegue gerar. Qual é a tese central, qual é a contribuição que tento oferecer? É que o biofilocentrismo dialético integral, ou seja, a centralização da vida como critério educativo, não é uma invenção exógena, mas um paradigma africano enraizado em tradições filosóficas e pedagógicas que sempre priorizaram a vida. Este paradigma pode reconstruir a soberania epistêmica africana e contribuir universalmente como alternativa ao modelo educativo dominante marcado por controle, fragmentação e dominação. Não basta propor africanizações curriculares pontuais, é necessária uma autêntica metanoia epistemológica. O documento apresenta 3 movimentos: diagnóstico, portanto, diagnóstico das feridas deixadas pela educação colonial, que são 6 patologias necrofílicas, e depois falo do imperativo de transformação radical, ou a necessidade da metanoia. E depois, proposta construtiva concreta, que avança 6 virtudes biofilocêntricas. Qual é a metodologia que adoto? A metodologia é uma reflexão filosófica conceitual inspirada na escuta atenta e hermenêutica das tradições, análise etimológica dos termos-chave, diálogo interdisciplinar com a filosofia africana, pedagógica crítica e alguns aspectos teológicos. O objetivo é oferecer uma gramática conceitual que orienta pesquisas empíricas, experimentações pedagógicas e reformas políticas, convocando uma colaboração multidisciplinar para encarnar a utopia biofilocêntrica. Introduzo aqui alguns conceitos que podem ajudar. O primeiro conceito, que é o neologismo, é o que chamo exatamente de nosfobia. Parte de nous, mas fobia. Na tradição grega, nous designa o olhar interior, a inteligência contemplativa que une saber, ser e agir. Nas tradições africanas, pensar e viver são inseparáveis. O nous africano exige educação que integre conhecimento, ética, espiritualidade, cultivando inteligência comunitária e crítica. Depois, o segundo conceito é a metanoia. Metanoia é a conversão ontológica da consciência, transformando a inteligência servil à dominação em inteligência servidora da vida. Na educação africana, não é africanizar currículos, mas inaugurar nous.
Veut dire inaugurer un nous capable d'intégrer la vie et le savoir. Dans ce cas, l'éducation fonctionne comme un instrument qui nous aide à cultiver la pratique de la liberté. La nécrophilie, selon Eric Fromm, c'est l'attraction par l'inerte et l'attraction par le destructif.
Porque silenciou línguas, impôs memorização, uniformidade e compartimentalização do saber. É aquilo que o filósofo Achille Mbembe diz: a soberania hoje significa a capacidade de decidir quem pode viver e quem deve morrer. Portanto, a educação colonial foi epistemocida. O último termo, o inverso da necrofilia, é a atração pela vida em todas as suas formas. Ubuntu, mate, que a comunicação define como necroformação. Este sistema gerou 6 feridas profundas que ainda hoje persistem no tecido social e cognitivo do continente. A primeira ferida é a nosofobia, não é? O medo do pensamento profundo, impôs a obediência, gerando autoritarismo e elitismo narcisista. Portanto, hoje, como consequência, as pessoas, ou no tempo colonial, tinham vergonha de falar a própria língua, tinham vergonha das próprias tradições. E vergonha, isto gerou um complexo de inferioridade do próprio modo de conhecer. A segunda ferida é mesocalia, que literalmente significa aversão ao próprio belo e à virtude. Esta ferida manifesta-se no auto-ódio estético-cultural e na destruição da autoestima coletiva. Portanto, até a própria pele não era apreciada, não era bonita. A própria cultura, a própria maneira de organizar a arquitetura, os cantos, muitas outras coisas, não eram apreciadas. O africano foi ensinado a desprezar a própria beleza, o próprio padrão da beleza. E, ao mesmo tempo, amar a beleza que vem de fora. E a terceira ferida é mixofobia, o medo da diversidade. Impôs uma lógica de segregação estrutural, aquilo que exatamente na África do Sul, no tempo da apartheid, foi o máximo, mas também nas nossas culturas, nas nossas nações, houve exatamente a divisão em regiões, em tribos, e isso causou hostilidade, causou fragmentação. Então, hoje, isso é explorado politicamente pelos partidos. A quarta ferida é ecocídio, que significa a destruição sistemática da casa comum, com perda irresistível de ecossistema e crise espiritual. Toda a economia era a economia ao serviço de fora, destruindo a riqueza da natureza africana. E a quinta ferida é o que podemos chamar de afropessimismo duplo. O afropessimismo duplo combina o externo, que é a narrativa global que nega o histórico, resultando em dependência tecnológica e epistemológica. E com o afropessimismo interno, que é a interiorização colonial da inferioridade. Esta internalização do pessimismo leva à paralisia civilizacional, à fuga de cérebros e à replicação inconsistente. Muito bem. Então, estas feridas todas levam exatamente ao que leva a incapacidade de sonhar, a incapacidade de utopia, a um pessimismo que não nos leva a pensar para o futuro. Por isso é que, como quarto aspecto, nós advogamos a urgência da conversão epistemológica, recuperando os conhecimentos tradicionais, mas não de uma maneira fechada, de uma maneira aberta. Por isso é que o dialético integral. O que nós chamamos de biocentrismo dialético integral? Primeiro, já dissemos, a vida deve ser o critério supremo, não é? A conservação da vida, não só vida biológica, mas a vida em várias dimensões, não é? Dialético, porque não deve ser só uma educação fechada, uma arqueologia cultural, não, deve se abrir, deve discutir, deve dialogar com outros saberes modernos. E dizemos que filocentrismo integral, porque integra a ciência e a tradição, a ciência e a espiritualidade, a ciência e a filosofia, não é? Integra diversas pedagogias modernas e também ancestrais. E então são 6 virtudes que nós advogamos para a transição disto. A primeira virtude é aquilo que chamamos de nosofilia, quer dizer, amor ao saber profundo, sapiencial, mas também científico, um amor a um saber integral. E a mixofilia, que cura exatamente esta mixofobia, e que se realiza através da arte pontifícia, saber criar pontes numa sociedade fragmentada e também a fragmentação individual. E depois também nós advogamos que é preciso criar uma nova diplomacia, a diplomacia biofílica, que não é só para a conquista do poder, mas é conquista exatamente de qualidades para a vida. A diplomacia que é para conquistar o poder é necrofílica, mas a diplomacia que é para potenciar, fazer crescer a vida é biofílica. Bom, já me disseram que tenho 2 minutos, então termino dizendo que o biocentrismo dialético integral é um contributo africano para a humanidade em crise. Cada escola restaurada e cada currículo reescrito transforma a África num laboratório de esperança capaz de oferecer ao mundo uma nova gramática da convivência, da criatividade e da justiça. É esta a metanoia educativa que pode pôr fim ao ciclo necrofílico que marcou a história da educação colonial. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Bishop Ernesto. May we appreciate his contribution. We have finished with the 3 keynote speakers. And after that phase where the 3 keynote speakers had a little bit of more time to expound their discussions, we come now to a different phase, which is a shorter one. It becomes more difficult. And this phase, the palaver, we have 4 presenters, and each of the presenters will have 7 minutes. And we begin, after these presenters, we'll have a health break, so don't worry. We begin with Reverend Dr. Joseph Afulo. Dr. Afulo is the immediate Vice Chancellor at Rupe Jesuit University in Zimbabwe, and he's going to present to us his topic on education towards personal integrity. Welcome, Papa Afulo.
Good afternoon. The topic, education towards personal integrity. Basically, we look at what the church has said over the years. In their first African Synod, we say the church as a family. In Lumen Gentium, we hear the family is the domestic church. So those of you who are logic-minded, you can have your conclusion. The church encourages strong family foundation. Education includes, Catholic education includes faith, morals, and social integration. And those who have experienced this take responsibility for their actions, and so there's accountability. Opportunities in Catholic education, there are opportunities for religious instructions, community service, reaching out to the disadvantage of a society. The expectations in those who have experienced Catholic education is relatively high. Good education leads to building healthy church and a healthy nation. In such education, you have structure of education, content of education, and pedagogy in any education gives a direction for such a process. Taking foundational formation, we find that a church is a domestic church, Lumen Gentium 1, and be the first preacher of the faith to their children. They should encourage them to vocation. Education is to offer complete formation of the person. Further, the family is a kind of school for deeper humanity, the beginning of awareness of piety and prayer and love for the church. In this situation, Africa Munus, the parents, as the first educators for their children in the life of faith, making fruitful the talents that God has placed in their hands, in their hearts, the heart of each person. The family, therefore, shares in its own unique way in the educational mission of the church, and thus the family is both teacher and mother. In the Book of Wisdom, we see some of the qualities that are expected of an educated person. Here is a spirit that is intelligent, holy, unique, manifold, subtle, mobile, clear, unpolluted, distinct, invulnerable, loving of good, keen, irresistible, beneficent, human, steadfast, and so on. The children, especially the younger among them, need to be the care of the mother at home. This domestic role of hers must be safely preserved, though the legitimate social progress of women should not be underrated on that account. We just note that most of the families at present rely on maids to take care of the children, and so there we miss input in educating the children. Parents are to show the mutual love and respect one another as role models and proper care for upbringing the children. Families are the first place that values of love and fraternity, togetherness and sharing, concern and care for others are lived out and handed on. The privileged milieu is a privileged milieu for transmitting the faith. That is expressed for Francis in Fratelli Tutti. In the African Synod, the first African Synod, we hear that the Catholic schools are one and at the same time places of evangelization, well-rounded education, inculturation, initiation to the dialogue of life among the people of different religions and different backgrounds. Furthermore, Christians and young people in particular should study the educational science with a view of passing down, that is tradition, the knowledge of full truth. The teachers who have the challenging task of training the children and the youth in school and other settings should be conscious that their responsibility extends to the morals, spiritual, and social aspects. Education, therefore, of the youth from every social background has to be undertaken so that there can be produced not only men and women of refined talents, but those of great-souled persons who are desperately required in our times, and that is Gaudium et Spes. We see that from Gaudium et Spes. Pope Francis emphasizes that the youth, young people often fail to find responses of their concerns. We find it hard to listen patiently to them, to appreciate their concerns and demands, and to speak to them in the language that they understand. At times we speak our own things, and we hope that the children will understand. There are religious congregations that have taken up education as their primary apostolate. We see the Don Bosco. They focus on the youth, not only for their secondary education, but also to rescue the vulnerable youth through their rigorous technical and industrial training. The Jesuit schools and universities still persist in producing some of the best graduates world over. Ignatian pedagogy remains one of the fundamental principles of instruction, yet many universities do not apply it in their educational curriculum. Mary Ward, that is the Loretos, they followed closely the footsteps of the Jesuits, taking the spirituality and pedagogy. When the girls were not allowed to go to school, Mary Ward took the initiative to bridge the gap. So it requires taking some risk when we engage in education. Some of the congregations, such as Brothers of Christian Instruction, School Sisters of St. Francis, School of Christ the King, and so on. These are congregations that by their very name shows that they have taken up education as their main apostolate, and they have contributed greatly. Then there's acknowledging men and women religious who are involved in education. We see that we have this question: how many institutes devote themselves to education, training and professional formation, preparing young people and those no longer young, because how many no longer young without reserve in service and most disadvantaged people? I'll just go to the conclusion since I have 1 minute, so that in conclusion, maybe one thing I want to mention: there is repression in schools, there is repression in educational systems. We have governments that change curriculum, change years of study, and these are very expensive. And these are situations where Catholic institutions need to take up research and try to see how they can appropriately advise the bishops on those places and respond appropriately. Catholic education is an instrument that drives humanity towards respecting the dignity of every person. Quality education helps beneficiaries to attain constant discernment on the events that is surrounding them. Then those who have experienced Catholic education are formed in questioning what is around them. They seek to answer and remain constantly inquisitive to the emerging occurrences in their surrounding. Catholic education and context where the education is provided affirm the human potential that is waiting to be explored and presented in simple language that the hearers of the word easily perceive. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Afulo, for that exposition. And later on, we are going to have small groups. We are going to disperse into small groups, and therefore these topics will be discussed at length. May we appreciate his contribution, please, together. The next presentation is by Reverend Professor Christian Gelesa, And Professor Gelesa is from Omnia Omnibus University from DRC, Congo. May I request the ICT to project his presentation, please? Professor Gelesa has also 7 minutes. The PowerPoint presentation, please.
Éminence, Excellence, Révérendissime, Auguste Assemblée, à vos titres et qualités respectifs, c'est pour moi une grande joie de porter ma contribution à ce 2e congrès africain de l'éducation catholique. Je remercie l'équipe d'organisation pour le choix porté sur ma modeste personne. Sous le titre « Études universitaires et développement intégral des sociétés africaines aujourd'hui, éclairage à partir du pacte éducatif africain », nous voulons mener une réflexion sur le lien entre la production universitaire et la capacité de celle-ci à servir le bien de la société. Nous distribuons notre propos en 4 points. Dans le premier point, nous allons circonscrire notre sujet dans le cadre du pacte éducatif africain. Dans le deuxième, nous nous évertuerons à faire un rappel historique autour des origines de l'université jusqu'à sa forme actuelle. Le troisième point est celui au cours duquel nous préciserons le rôle de l'université dans le processus du développement des peuples. Le quatrième et dernier point sera consacré à la présentation de l'expérience de l'université Omnia Omnibus en cette matière. Une brève conclusion fera le point des acquis majeurs de notre réflexion. 1. L'importance des universités d'après le pacte éducatif africain. Comme nous le savons, le pacte éducatif africain est une initiative de l'Église catholique pour repenser l'éducation sur le continent africain en s'appuyant sur ses valeurs traditionnelles et en promouvant l'éducation à la paix et à la vie intérieure. Proclamé à Kinshasa en novembre 2022, ce pacte découle du pacte éducatif global du pape François et s'inscrit dans une perspective de renouvellement afin de faire naître en Afrique des lieux d'espérance où le bien de la personne et de la nature sont respectés et préservés. Il se décline en 4 axes principaux. C'est dans le 4e et dernier axe qu'il assigne aux universités catholiques en pleine croissance dans les diocèses et pays d'Afrique la mission de jouer un rôle clé pour l'amélioration des conditions de vie dans la société. 2. Quelques repères historiques sur la naissance des universités. Des sources renseignent que c'est Théodose et son entourage qui sont à l'origine de la création de la première université, l'université de Constantinople, en 425. Mais dans sa forme actuelle, même si cela ne se vérifie que de façon progressive, l'université serait née à la 2e moitié du XIIe siècle et serait l'invention des scolastiques. Aujourd'hui, on s'accorde à définir l'université comme étant une institution d'enseignement supérieur constituée par le regroupement des divers établissements nommés suivant les différentes traditions, facultés, instituts, départements, centres, sections, unités ou écoles spécifiques, munis de bibliothèques, laboratoires, médiathèques et parfois d'un musée, formant un ensemble administratif cohérent avec un statut de droit défini public ou privé. En ce qui concerne la méthode de l'enseignement, l'on place le centre de l'enseignement aujourd'hui sur l'auto-formation de l'étudiant, considérant l'apport des professeurs, de la bibliothèque, des colloques, comme un appui à l'auto-formation de l'étudiant. Voilà pourquoi depuis un moment, plusieurs universités ont adopté le système de licence, master, doctorat, qui n'est rien d'autre qu'un système qui vise l'auto-formation en mettant l'étudiant au centre de la formation, l'aidant à faire des recherches approfondies qui débouchent sur des projets des sociétés en favorisant l'approche par compétences. 3. Le rôle des universités dans les processus de progrès social et de développement. Une double interrogation s'impose à nous. Peut-on attribuer à l'université la fonction de construction sociale? 2. Quel est le rôle de l'enseignement supérieur dans le développement de nos pays? Pour répondre à ces deux questions, 3 hypothèses peuvent nous aider. Premièrement, l'université comme lieu de production de savoir. D'aucuns considèrent l'université comme un système de production. De la sorte, l'université doit fonctionner selon le principe de productivité, comme c'est le cas en économie. Toutefois, il est nécessaire de souligner que l'université est à la fois formatrice d'hommes, mais également productrice d'idées, c'est-à-dire créatrice de situations conceptuelles nouvelles qui contribuent au développement. De ce point de vue, les objectifs de l'université ne se limitent pas aux préoccupations propres de cette dernière, mais plutôt ils s'ouvrent aux préoccupations de la société entière. Sa production n'a des valeurs que dans la mesure où elle est socialement acceptée, car réalisée dans le souci de répondre aux besoins complexes de la société. Cela n'est envisageable que par la voie de la recherche qui permet à l'enseignant d'abord de maîtriser les connaissances acquises, ensuite d'avoir une capacité de production continue en créant les conditions de cette même créativité chez les apprenants. 2. L'université comme lieu de construction de la société. L'autre défi majeur de l'université aujourd'hui concerne la construction des sociétés. En effet, l'enseignement supérieur est essentiel à la création de la capacité intellectuelle dont dépend de la production et l'utilisation du savoir. Il est aussi essentiel pour la mise en œuvre des pratiques d'apprentissage tout au long de la vie, pratiques nécessaires à l'actualisation des connaissances et des compétences acquises. Le savoir doit donc occuper une place importante et même grandissante dans le processus de construction de société. Pour que l'université contribue efficacement au développement de n'importe quelle société, nous pensons qu'elle doit s'investir dans le capital humain, d'abord à travers une formation de qualité. 3. Enfin, l'université comme facteur de développement économique. Du point de vue économique, l'université est devant un monde qui se caractérise par la globalisation et l'économie reste l'indice le plus puissant dans le processus de développement des pays. En général, le rôle de l'enseignement supérieur dans le développement est très important dans la mesure où l'université contribue d'une façon efficace au développement en fournissant aux économies nationales les ressources humaines nécessaires. Suivant cette logique, certains pays en voie de développement ont adopté une stratégie consistante à concevoir leur système universitaire de façon à réduire l'écart entre matière des connaissances et des technologies afin de faire progresser leurs économies. Cela ne sera possible que si l'éducation devient une priorité pour une nation. 4e et dernier point, l'expérience de l'université Omnia Omnibus. Créée en 2021, l'université Omnia Omnibus a été voulue comme un instrument pastoral de l'archidiocèse de Kinshasa pour répondre à un souci pastoral, ainsi qu'on l'aurait pu sentir dans la communication du cardinal Fridolin Ambongo comme conférence inaugurale, le souci de la misère du peuple. En effet, à Kinshasa, nous avons 616 écoles conventionnées catholiques, 151 écoles privées catholiques, sans compter des autres écoles, des individus qui sont catholiques. Alors, toute cette masse d'étudiants, des élèves qui finissent, tous n'ont pas accès à l'université catholique. Alors, c'est ce besoin pastoral qui a été au cœur de la création de cette université en 2021 pour la formation des élites en vue d'un développement durable et harmonieux. Notre université intègre son action dans une stratégie de l'éducation et de la formation en visant un système éducatif équitable et inclusif au service de la croissance et de l'emploi, du progrès social qualitatif attesté par le système d'assurance qualité. Dans cette perspective, elle propose une offre de formation qui met l'accent sur les disciplines techniques notamment, celles qui sont susceptibles de promouvoir le bien-être humain. Ainsi, les facultés sont conçues comme des incubateurs pour faciliter le démarrage des projets innovants conçus par les étudiants en vue de résoudre les problèmes réels de la société. En guise d'illustration, nous mentionnons 2 expériences. La première expérience date de l'année 2024. Il s'agit d'une initiative promue par notre faculté des sciences de bio-ingénieurs en collaboration avec la faculté polytechnique de l'Université catholique de Louvain dans le cadre de son programme Ingénieur Sud, intitulé, voilà, Elenge Moloni, ce qui veut dire jeune agriculteur. Ce projet réalisé au village Mabamba dans les territoires de Kasangulu, dans la province du Congo central, non loin de la ville de Kinshasa, avait comme objectif de résoudre la problématique de l'arrosage d'un champ sur une étendue de 120 hectares, comme vous le voyez là, en un milieu non desservi en eau potable par la Régie nationale de distribution d'eau. Les étudiants en sciences des bio-ingénieurs, mention sciences agronomiques, qui y avaient travaillé, ont pu, à partir d'un forage créé à cette fin, remonter l'eau sur une distance de plus ou moins 850 mètres, offrant ainsi une réponse durable et efficace aux besoins d'irrigation. La deuxième expérience en cours de réalisation, c'est dans le domaine des sciences de la santé, qui est portée par notre faculté de santé publique en collaboration avec la Commission nationale femmes entrepreneurs de la Fédération des entreprises du Congo, qui est intitulé ce projet Raël Life, c'est-à-dire Rachel Vie, du nom de l'étudiante qui a émis l'idée. Il s'agit d'un projet visant à constituer un réseau communautaire intégré de nutrition préventive et de surveillance du bien-être des enfants de moins de 5 ans à Kinshasa. Et ce projet offre des points intégrés qui offrent les services ci-après: consultation de croissance et dépistage actif, atelier de cuisine nutritionnelle locale, éducation et conseils préventifs. Il est à noter que ces services, qui visent le bien-être des enfants de moins de 5 ans, constituent aussi une sorte d'activité génératrice des recettes pour les étudiants qui y travaillent. En cela, ce projet est aussi une initiative qui favorise à la fois le développement social et l'esprit d'entrepreneuriat, comme le premier projet. Conclusion. Tout ce qui précède montre bien qu'en Afrique contemporaine, l'université, tout en gardant sa mission principale d'être une instance de production de savoir, savoir-faire et savoir-être, dans la droite ligne de sa triple fonction d'enseignement, de recherche et de service à la communauté, elle doit se constituer aussi en une sorte d'incubateur innovant de la recherche appliquée pour apporter des solutions optimales aux problèmes de société. Elle sera alors les lieux de l'espérance tenace en un lendemain meilleur pour les hommes et les femmes en quête de mieux-être. Je dis et je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Professor Christian Gelesa, for your input. And as I mentioned, we'll have a session whereby, in fact, I've been allowed to take 1 or 2 questions or contributions. We are going to do this after this session. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the presence of His Grace Archbishop Philip Anyolo, the Metropolitan Archbishop of the Archdiocese of Nairobi, and he will have a few minutes also after these sessions. This time now, may I invite Sister Professor Elizabeth Duku. Professor Duku is from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, where we are, and she's going to speak on promoting human dignity through education, the mission of Catholic schools in Africa. She has 7 minutes.
Thank you. I begin by saying that education is a transformative process that shapes the human person toward truth, freedom, and responsible citizenship by developing critical thinking, analytical, and problem-solving skills. Catholic schools embrace this vision of transformation by grounding its mission in the inviolable dignity of the human person who is created in the image and likeness of God. And since education is one of the human rights, the Catholic Church has been instrumental in its provision, and they offer holistic formation of the person. They help students to view education as a path to personal growth, a means to serve others, and a way to help build just and peaceful communities. On the concept of human dignity, the Catholic Church teaches that human dignity is the inherent and inviolable worth of every person, founded on the belief that all are created in the image and likeness of God. It stems from God himself, who is the origin and end of the human person. This dignity, according to Pope Benedict, is also rooted in the unique human capacities for reason, freedom, and love, which are God-like qualities that distinguish humans from the rest of creation. Education, therefore, which is a fundamental human right, helps the learners and students to understand this particular dignity. Catholic education, therefore, does this by offering holistic education. And Catholic education is an approach to learning that integrates faith and reason into the holistic development of the person. It seeks to educate the intellectual, moral, spiritual, social, and all the aspects of the human person. It enables learners to demonstrate how divine revelation and human inquiry work together to build a holistic worldview. The central mission of the Catholic education, therefore, is the pursuit of truth, recognizing that God is the ultimate truth. And this is guided by her rich intellectual tradition. For the Catholic schools, these are institutions which combine standard academics with the faith-based curriculum. They're established and guided by the teachings, values, and traditions of the Catholic Church and rooted in the gospel values, and focus on holistic development of each student. Key characteristics that we find in these schools include prayer, mass, learning about Catholic doctrine, and the focus on forming students into the ethically and morally responsible individuals who can make positive contributions to the society. These schools are places of evangelization and forms part of the saving mission of the church, especially when they educate for faith, in faith. They focus on faith-based education and education on the human dignity. In Africa, we realize that human dignity is affected by poverty, bad governance, violation of human rights, war and conflicts, unemployment, environmental degradation, among others. And therefore, the Catholic schools engage in ensuring that they promote human dignity. They are known for holistic formation, strong discipline, academic excellence, moral formation, and community involvement. And this is what they use to promote human dignity. As we said, they ground their principle that on the principle that every person is created in the image of and likeness of God, and therefore they make each individual inherently valuable and sacred. And therefore they develop policies that promote, protect, and develop the human person. And for the Catholic schools to offer this, they engage in various ways, and especially they offer opportunities to integrate the principles of the Catholic social teaching. They do this by focusing on the preferential option for the poor in their schools. The Catholic schools offer opportunities to all learners without discrimination, regardless of one's social status, and teach about social justice and fostering a culture of empathy and service. They provide targeted support programs, financial assistance, partnerships, and community outreach, ensuring that vulnerable students have access to quality education and are encouraged to be committed to serving others. The Catholic University, for instance, established a scholarship fund in honor of the servant of God, Maurice Cardinal Tunga, to support the needy students. They also engage in contribution of material goods during community mass every Thursday so that they can support the poor. There's also a work study program which supports the poor. Parents in St. Joseph Millennium School in Tanzania, working together through the PTA, also established a special education kit called Mfuko wa Elimu, a kit for education to support also the poor. So you realize that the Catholic schools engage in preferential option for the poor. They also engage in stewardship of the environment. And we say that environmental stewardship is the responsible use and protection of the natural environment through conservation and sustainable practices. Catholic schools ensure that the care of environment is given priority. They engage in school-wide initiatives, outdoor learning, student-led clubs, and partnership with the community. And their action range from minimizing waste and pollution to conservation efforts like tree planting, among others. And therefore, they view environmental care as a moral and spiritual duty, connecting faith with action. We, inspired by Laudato Si, we find many schools having Laudato Si clubs. We have La Salle, we have the Holy Cross province schools having the same. They also teach on common good, which is the sum total of social conditions which allow people either as groups or as individuals to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. To do this, they focus on specific programs like service learning, social justice clubs, and partnerships with charities that actively engage students in community service and helping others. Through the Ubuntu philosophy, which is embraced and emphasizes the interconnectedness of all peoples, the Catholic schools nurture among the learners values of care, compassion, and independence, so that each has a concern for their fellow brother and sister. They work to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the community, avoiding excessive individualism. We have examples of the Loreto schools in Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, who instill among their learners this value of community and engage in different activities. Catholic schools teach about the dignity of work. They teach learners about the dignity of work and that through it, they participate in God's creation and as such, it should be taken positively. They create opportunities where learners engage in creative work and sometimes also in some income-generating projects. Schools promote work environment based on fairness, respect, and the rights of workers, guided by the encyclical Rerum Novarum of Pope Leo XIII. These schools teach students about the dignity of work, regardless of how it is perceived, and the importance of treating all works with respect. They also teach on peace education through initiatives like Justice and Peace Commissions. Catholic schools contribute to the civic education. They implement programs that teach students how to resolve disputes constructively and peacefully, by also creating a safe environment. But as they do this, they find challenges of conflicting faith in the schools, financial challenges, management challenges, integrating Catholic social teachings into the curriculum, war and conflicts. But although they find this, there are possible ways of curbing these challenges. Administrators have a responsibility of educating the entire school community to understand the Catholic principles about human dignity and sacredness of human life. They need to create an environment where members of the community, and especially those from other faiths, feel welcome and valued, and this will motivate them to learn the Catholic values and live by them. Develop and implement clear policies and procedures that prevent discrimination of any form. Have special funds to cater for the poor. Foster and nurture positive relationships between students, parents, and community by ensuring they have open event. integrate Catholic social teaching by encouraging learners to advocate for the rights of the vulnerable and to engage in social justice activities. This can include, maybe they can use films and other media to expose students to real-life social justices like domestic violence, FGM, war and conflict, and this can help them to critically analyze these messages, and they become advocates and voice of the voiceless. And therefore, they must ensure that gospel values inform all policies. Teachers are formed in Catholic educational philosophy and the like. I conclude by saying that promoting human dignity lies at the heart of the mission of the Catholic education and Catholic schools. Schools must create opportunities and develop programs that uphold human dignity through their curriculum. And by offering holistic formation, learners will be prepared to be agents of transformation, capable of addressing the challenges facing their communities. Despite challenges, Catholic schools and Catholic education will still remain a beacon of hope, promoting the dignity of every learner and building a more just and compassionate world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Professor Duku, for this introduction. The topic, we'll have more time to discuss and deepen the topic. For now, as we are almost concluding this session of the Palava, we are going to the newest Catholic university in Kenya, and there we have its Vice Chancellor, Professor Patrick Mwanya, the Vice Chancellor of Tangaza University. He's going to discuss the Forming a New African Humanism, Catholic Education and the Promise of Hope in the Global Compact on Education. He equally has 7 minutes.
I thought, being the last speaker, I would have slightly more minutes. Good evening and welcome to my presentation. I have some slides, about 8-9 slides. Please, people in the control room, if you can project my few slides. My presentation is titled Forming a New African Educational Humanism, Catholic Education and Promise of Hope in the Global Compact on Education. And this presentation examines the future of education in Africa from theological, cultural, and developmental perspectives. And the central question that I'm posing to you, to us in this presentation is, how can Catholic education contribute meaningfully to Africa's hope and renewal, especially in light of Pope Francis's Global Compact on Education? And this talk reflects on both the challenges and opportunities before us as we consider education not just as an academic exercise, but as a deeply ethical, spiritual, and social vocation. First of all, the context and purpose of this presentation. This discussion emerges from a growing concern shared across the African continent that our educational systems are not sufficiently preparing young people for ethical leadership, cultural rootedness, and transformative social engagement. And therefore, 3 central motivations shape my arguments. 1, the Africa's demographic shift, that the continent as the world's youngest population, how we educate this generation will determine Africa's cultural, political, and religious trajectories for decades. And 2, a crisis of values and identity, that many young Africans face fragmented identities, shaped by digital influences, economic inequalities, and rapid globalization. 3, the Church's ongoing educational mission. Catholic education continues to have a major presence across Africa, making it a significant partner in shaping the future of human development. And my argument is that Catholic education, when renewed through the Global Compact on Education, can form a new African educational humanism, one that integrates faith, reason, culture, and community. A core theological foundation to my argument is that this argument begins with foundational Christian anthropology. Catholic education is rooted in the belief that the human person is created in the image and likeness of God, the Imago Dei. These are several implications for education. One, that human dignity is non-negotiable. Every educational initiative must protect and promote the dignity of learners. And 2, the human person is relational. Just as the Trinity is relational, so too is human flourishing communal rather than purely individualistic. 3rd, education is sacramental. It participates in God's work of forming persons capable of love, truth, freedom, and justice. And finally, that integral formation is central. Education must form the whole person morally, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, and socially. Thus, Catholic education is ultimately a ministry, an act of hope that nurtures the seed of God's grace in human lives. African communitarian ethos, slide number 4. The presentation beautifully weaves Catholic theological anthropology with African cultural anthropology, especially the concept of Ubuntu. Ubuntu embodies values that are deeply compatible with Catholic social teachings. The aspect of interdependence, I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. Collective responsibility. The community forms the individual, and the individual contributes to the community. Respect for elders and ancestors. A reminder of continuity, heritage, and moral tradition. And harmony and reconciliation, echoing the Christian vision of communion and peace. My argument, therefore, is that an authentically African educational humanism cannot be individualistic. Instead, it must reflect Africa's communal soul and emphasize relationships, mutual care, and the common good. This reinforces the synergy between African values and the Church's educational mission. But there are challenges in African education. Slide number 5. To understand the promise of Catholic education, the article of my presentation examines the challenges that African education is facing. And this includes, and not limited to, inequalities in access, that rural-urban divides, gender disparities, and economic barriers create uneven opportunities. Challenge number 2, underfunded infrastructure. That many schools lack classrooms, libraries, laboratories, or even basic sanitation. Challenge 3, teacher shortages and limited professional development. 4, cultural alienation, where curricula often reflects external models and fail to integrate African languages, stories, ethics, and worldviews. Challenge number 5, globalization pressures, where youth increasingly face identity fragmentation as Western media and digital cultures reshape values. And finally, erosion of moral formation, where modern education tends to focus on skills without character, creating a gap in ethical and civic leadership. My argument, therefore, is that these challenges call for a model of education that is not just technically competent, but also morally and spiritually formative. And therefore, the contribution of Global Compact on Education. In 2019, Pope Francis launched the Global Compact on Education, a worldwide initiative involving all peoples of goodwill to create a new educational vision rooted in human dignity, solidarity, and sustainability. The Compact promotes 7 commitments, including putting the human person at the center of education, listening to younger generations, empowering women and girls, making the family a primary agent of education, building solidarity and peace, protecting the environment, and finally, creating a shared culture of encounter. I argue that these commitments align naturally with African concerns and offer a framework for reforming both policy and pedagogy across continent. More importantly, the Compact invites collaborative efforts. Church, state, families, traditional leaders, educators, NGOs, and young people themselves. Slide number 7, Catholic education as a transformative force. I wish to highlight the long historical role that Catholic education has played in shaping African society. Catholic schools, as the speakers before have highlighted, and universities have traditionally been strong in quality academic formation, discipline and ethical contact, leadership development, serving learning and community engagement, faith formation and spiritual growth. Moreover, a Catholic education teaches students to see themselves as part of a larger mission, the transformation of society in light of the gospel. This presentation argues that Catholic education nurtures virtues such as responsibility, compassion, critical thinking, integrity, social justice, stewardship of creation. Thus, Catholic education forms the whole person who is capable of contributing to Africa's renewal, not only intellectually, but morally, spiritually, and socially. Towards a new African educational humanism. This is the heart of my presentation, the call, ladies and gentlemen, for a new African educational humanism. I wish to propose that true educational renewal must do the following. 1, integrate African communitarianism within Catholic anthropology. Ubuntu and Imago Dei together offer a robust vision of human dignity and relationality. 2, respond to today's socio-economic and cultural realities. That education must prepare learners for global citizenship without alienating them from their African identity. 3, prioritize the common good. Education must form people who care about justice, equity, and the well-being of society. 4, foster ecological consciousness. Students must see creation as a gift entrusted to our care. 5, renew moral and civic formation. Africa needs leaders who are ethical, compassionate, and servant-hearted. And finally, education that promotes interreligious harmony. Education should encourage dialogue and praise peace among diverse communities. This new humanism is not merely theoretical. It is deeply practical and grounded in everyday educational experiences, teaching, mentoring, community service, and cultural formation. In conclusion, I want to conclude with a message of hope that Catholic education, when renewed through African values and the Global Compact on Education, offers a powerful path toward 1, moral human development, 2, moral cultural renewal, 3, ethical and servant leadership, 4, stronger communities, 5, ecological responsibility, and finally, a more just and peaceful Africa. I invite educators, church leaders, and policymakers to embrace this vision and collaborate in forming a generation that embodies dignity, solidarity, and hope. A reminder to all of us is that education is not just about preparing for the future, it is about shaping the future itself. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Patrick Manuel, for this interesting topic. And as I mentioned, we'll have a chance to deepen the conversation. You'll all agree that in all the 7 discussions that we have had, interactions that we have had, there is a desire for a holistic education. There is a desire for a transformative education. The challenge that the presenters are trying to navigate now is how do we arrive at that holistic education. It is a responsibility to all of us, and I think one of the reasons why we are here is really to navigate this path. Allow me at this time to break a little bit before the health break, and I know maybe we would like to stretch a bit, but before then, I would like to invite the Vice Chancellor of Catholic University of Eastern Africa, Professor Stephen Bogo, to come forward for a short special message. The presenters, we will remain seated as we are. We will have 1 or 2 interactions after this. Once again, asanteni sana. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Fridolin Cardinal Ambongo, the Archbishop of Kinshasa and also the President of SECAM, Your Eminences, Your Graces, the scholars, and all the distinguished guests, and the choir community, Tangaza community, and Hekima community. I take this chance to thank you again for the continued fruitful contributions that have been given this morning. As I have been listening, I think as universities, as institutions of learning, we have a lot to take up, and so that we can embrace and transform our students in the modern age of media, the modern age of materialism, and also the modern age of naturalism. They just want to be natural in their sciences. This afternoon, I wish to say that we have now His Grace Philip Anyolo, the Archbishop of the Metropolitan Diocese of Nairobi. He is with us to say hello to us, to give his remarks, so that he can welcome us to his archdiocese. We thank you, Your Grace, for welcoming us to the Basilica on Sunday to celebrate the Mass, and we look forward to that day that we shall be celebrating at the door of hope of your basilica. So karibu sana, Your Grace.
So, Your Eminence, Jose Tolentino, Cardinal de Mandinga, Prefect of the Dicastery of Culture and Education in absentia. His Eminence Fridolin Cardinal Ambongo, President of the SECAM and Archbishop of Kinshasa. Your Eminences, Cardinals here present, Your Excellencies the Archbishops, Your Excellencies the Bishops, and all protocol observed. I am here to say a word of welcome. I would like to thank the Institute for African Combat on Education in collaboration with the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, Tangaza, and Hekima University for organizing and hosting the second African Congress of Catholic Education here in Kwea, Nairobi. I also take this opportunity to welcome you all to the Metropolitan Archdiocese of Nairobi. In a special way, I would like to thank Your Eminences here present with us, and my brother bishops and archbishops, ladies and gentlemen, for gracing this Congress, which is to run for the next 4 days. Your Eminences and my brother bishops, ladies and gentlemen, for centuries the Catholic Church has led a global push over quality, value-based education to citizens across the world. In this regard, the Church in Kenya is an active private partner in the provision of education. This education is provided under the guidance of the Church documents such as Gravissimum Educationis and Veritatis Gratuum, the Code of Canon Law, and respective national policies on education. This second African Congress theme is Catholic education and the promotion of signs of hope in the African context. In Kenya, Catholic education is the champion of value-based education. In a society of rampant corruption, in a society of disintegrating morals, materialism, secularism, this society is in need of professionals who embrace values and morality in their professional and social lives. Through the inculcation of value-based quality education to our students, Catholic education in Kenya has been able to answer the call of producing value-based professionals, scholars, and artisans. Our education process ensures that the students who go through the school doors to be educated, that's in primaries and secondaries and even universities, are formed to be ethical leaders in church and in the society. That is why the Catholic University's vision which is to be a university that empowers people to become ethical leaders for the church and society, is very relevant to us today. The students who study in Catholic schools in Kenya are the hope of our society. As such, and as much as that, we find ourselves in a society that remains wanting in regard to values, morality and ethics, and graduates of Catholic schools, colleges and universities remain the beacon of hope that shines bright today and even in the future. As you hold discourse in relation to Catholic education and on the Congress theme, I will be, and we shall be, very interested to hear what the Congress resolves in relation to how they innovatively offer value-based education to society, especially in the volatile and fast-changing society like the ones that we live in today. For this, may God bless you and guide your discussions to reflect His will for the African continent and far beyond. God bless you most abundantly and welcome to Kenya. And I want to say welcome in a special way, as Father has mentioned, to the Holy Family Minor Basilica on Sunday for us to crown this wonderful event that is our event and the event of the church, the event of God's will. Karibuni, asanteni.
Thank you very much, Your Grace, for your kind words and welcoming us and challenging us. It is noteworthy that His Grace is the Pro-Chancellor of the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. So he's my boss. I don't know if I will lose my job today, but pray for me. Thank you very much and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Godwin. Thank you very much, His Grace Philip. And that was just also part of a welcoming speech. His Grace was held up somewhere and he has a meeting going on, so we are going also to allow him to exit as he proceeds to the other meeting. In the meantime, I mentioned that we have been allocated a slot whereby we may have a question, a clarification to the presenters, and I will ask that if you have a question or something that you would like to add to enrich the conversation. If you raise up your hand, then the mic will be brought to you. I request Dr. Vittorio to pass over the mic to anyone who may have a contribution or question. We're going to take 3, please. Yes, we'll do it. Okay, good. Yes, Dr. Masali.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. I'm aware that the time was very short, so there is more one can discover. I have been asked this question several times, and I see all of you in your capacities. We have Catholic schools, universities, and most of our government leaders and leaders on this continent have gone through those schools. Where do we miss it? when we see what is going on the continent, and our leaders have gone through Catholic education, and yet we see a lot of political dysfunctionality, we see a lot of corruption, we have had genocide, to count my own country in Rwanda. We had violence here in Kenya in 2007, 2008, and most of our leaders are actually alumni of Catholic education. Is there a missing link somewhere? And what can we do? How do we locate the problem so that we solve it? Thank you very much. The question can be answered by any of you. Let me probably ask the vice chancellors or the immediate vice chancellors to answer this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marcel. Let's take another input. We have a hand here, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to address my question to the last speaker. Do you think that Ubuntu is a reality in our today's society, African society? Because we are talking about Ubuntu, that is African philosophy. And you see, I'm happy because we are happy, or I'm, how you say that? I'm good, I'm fine because we are fine. So we have to work together. But my question is, do you think that Ubuntu is real, is a reality in our society, or today's society in Africa? And if not, where was it broken? Because we are saying that this is our African philosophy, this is our way of being in life. So if it is not yet a reality, where was that broken? And why, if possible? And the next question, how do you think the Catholic education can effectively, so I can underline the word effectively, shape minds of our, ourselves in a society? I would like to come to the question that the father was asking some while ago. If our politicians, they are showing that they have problems, but they were educated in the Catholic University, do you think that within the church, we have solved everything of injustice, of corruption, of those things? Because if we didn't shape ourselves very well yet, how can we expect our politicians to be good? So are we fine in the church? What do you think about that?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There are two questions there. They'll be answered by Eni, and specifically to the last speaker. We take the last one. I'll take three, and then, because we have a panel, and if a question is responded to, unless you are adding, then you can proceed. Let's take the last one. There are ladies also in the room. There are women. Maybe I'll give, there is a prof there. Just give her a mic also to be sensitive to, or to be inclusive.
Merci beaucoup de m'accorder la parole. Je voudrais poser la question aux deux derniers intervenants par rapport à la contribution de l'Université catholique dans un contexte de pluralisme religieux. Vous avez mentionné le fondement de l'intégrité et le fondement anthropologique est clair, mais nous nous demandons dans le contexte du pluralisme religieux où nous accueillons beaucoup de jeunes qui appartiennent à une diversité religieuse et des personnes sans foi, comment est-ce qu'on peut aider ces gens-là qui n'appartiennent pas à notre foi, à la foi catholique? Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marcel, because you can translate your question in French. I think there's some people have missed your question, please. Yeah. can.
Eh bien, merci beaucoup. Mon nom, c'est Marcel Ouineza, prêtre jésuite. Et ma question va en rapport avec les dirigeants que nous avons ici, qui ont étudié dans des écoles catholiques. Du moins, la majorité des dirigeants que nous avons ont étudié dans des écoles catholiques. Et quand nous voyons le fonctionnement de nos leaders et les problèmes que nous faisons face, pourquoi est-ce que l'éducation catholique n'a pas changé de cœur ou bien même donné la valeur pour qu'il y ait un fonctionnement de leadership différent? Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose qui manque? Voilà, c'est ça ma question. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Let's have short questions, please. Short responses. You are most welcome, whoever would like to begin.
Okay, thank you for those few questions. I just want to give a little contribution and give the mic to others to add. To the first question, where did we go wrong? When we look at our politicians and most of our leaders who have gone through Catholic education and yet they don't seem to have acquired the values we are talking about and we've been giving. I would say that I think a human being is a being in becoming, and therefore there is hope that even as we continue to accentuate and to emphasize more on value-based education, we are going to get it right. Of course, is a contradiction in the human person that maybe we expect that they should have all acquired these values and they should be living these values, but we see the opposite is happening. So I would say there's a contradiction in human person, and I would say that maybe a little bit more of engaging as a church, even challenging those people will help. To the question about whether Ubuntu is still a reality, I would say it's still a reality. I think it's still something, there are values that we can still go back to. Unfortunately, I said sometimes we tend to embrace foreign ideologies and forget about our own cultural values. And that's why my presentation was a call for us to look back at our cultures and see some of those values that would help us to become more responsible human beings and work on them. And I hope with this conference and with our universities taking a lead, we should be able to retrieve those values in our cultures, and we can make them a reality, even when they have not yet become a reality. Thank you.
Where did we go wrong? I think many of you have been with mass servers who interact with priests more regularly. Have you ever found some of your mass servers taking wine in the sacristy? Taking wine, taking horse, and picking from the sadaka? Have you seen that? Where did we go wrong? I think my presentation started with Lumen Gentium, the church, the family as a domestic church. What goes on in the family after they join in Mass, after catechesis, what goes on? And I think a sound family, and so a call to a pastoral care for the family, that could in some way address some of these mysteries that we are experiencing. Because the children are influenced by the parents, the children are influenced by their peers, and when they grow up, they start stealing big. They don't just steal the posts. there's still bigger things. So it could start with the family. And then in our schools, at present the schools are so crowded, whether you take it in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, the classes are so overcrowded, such that the interaction between the students and the teacher is very limited. And the students are overworked with too many assignments. So time for reflection is not there. Can we, in different ways, take care of the family and also try to take care of the children such that we help them? The third thing is on the trends. You find that our countries, take Tanzania, take Kenya, take Uganda, the education system is changed at a blink of an eye without regard to the value or the content of education. What do we present in our curriculum? That which we present in our curriculum and the conviction with which the teachers present these ideas, these affect our children at a very personal level, and it is reflected when they finally grow up. On the issue of Ubuntu, Mwalimu Nyerere, in one of his political addresses, he said, Ujamaa ni utu. Utu and Ubuntu are more or less the same thing. Ujamaa is human. Basically, we are invited to be human. So whatever philosophy you subscribe to, basically being human, dealing with other people with dignity, I think that addresses the part that affects our education. So I'd just propose that we try to have our children reflect in decent reflection so that every day they can examine themselves and rectify themselves daily, and this could give us a better direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I request summarize short responses so that we can engage, at least everyone can have a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to support what Father said, that education is a collaborative exercise, and therefore schools alone cannot be able to form these students. We need all of us to be engaged. But we have also a challenge of people looking for employment, and therefore they come to these universities, to these schools, not because they are convinced of what they are getting, but because they know when they leave these universities, when they leave these schools, because they have a name, they are going to be employed. So the thing is not about getting the values that we are offering, but getting a certificate that is going to be recognized and a certificate that is going to be marketable in this particular market. So I think we need to mold these people, yes, but have everyone engaged, and let us be role models. Thank you.
Parlo un po' in italiano perché è un po' difficile capire in portoghese. Che cosa è mancato? Dobbiamo guardare un po' storicamente. L'educazione coloniale è educazione per avere. Una persona che è educata nella scuola deve avere un impiego, deve lavorare, guadagnare i soldi. Non è un'educazione per formare la persona per essere. E quindi l'educazione nella scuola, nell'università, la persona persegue questi, guadagnare qualche cosa, ma non trasformare. Allora io credo che dobbiamo riflettere in fondo, se questa educazione che noi abbiamo è veramente trasformativa. I curriculi che abbiamo sono veramente trasformativi o no. Quindi non possiamo continuare nel mio modo di pensare che ci sarà trasformazione se prendiamo i curriculi del mondo globale senza considerare la nostra essenza africana, la tradizione.
Thank you very much. And I'm advised here that there are some guests who would like to exit. But before then, we had also a token of appreciation to our guests and our presenters. So that's why I would request that I cut short the session so that they can be gifted. And therefore, I invite Dr. Gitonga to come forward and please conduct this exercise.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I can see we've had a long day, and you've all been amazing. Thank you for staying engaged. Even as the energy dips a little, we are almost there. In every situation, great missions require stamina. Any mission that was achieved inahitaji nguvu kidogo. So you have shown the grace today, and thank you so much. So we go straight away to the awards or the gifting, if I may put it that way. And we have about 10 guests whom we are going to gift right now. I will call upon our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Munyuki. I don't know whether he's still in the auditorium. Professor Munyuki is still in. Because he can start us off, because I can see the Vice Chancellor, who was scheduled to award the first 3, might have escorted His Grace outside. So I think we may need to, yeah, he's here. Oh, even our Vice Chancellor is back. So Karibuni, we are going to go straight away to the first awardee, and we are going to gift His Eminence, Fridolin Cardinal Lambongo, the Bishop of Kinshasa and the President of SECAM. His Eminence, the VC is our Vice Chancellor, the very Reverend Professor Stephen Bogwangari will award him. Okay, next, maybe he's not in the auditorium at the moment. Then we go to His Eminence Antoine Cardinal Kambanda, the Bishop of Kigali. Karibu sana. Please come to the front. So our Vice Chancellor will gift His Eminence Antoine Cardinal Kambanda. Let us give them a big clap, please. Thank you, His Eminence. Thank you. Prof, please don't leave. We have the next awardee, and we're going to go to award it to Makonde. I want to get his actual name. Where is his actual name? Can you see his name here? So the very Reverend Father Anthony Makunde, the Secretary General of AMESEA, please come forward and receive your gift if you're in the auditorium. The next giftee will be Ernesto Magwengwe, the Bishop of Inhabane in Mozambique. From Mozambique, karibu Bishop. Asante sana. Karibu sana, and thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you, our dear Vice Chancellor. The next to assist us award will be the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Munyoki. Please don't leave the stage. And we are going to begin with Dr. Marcel Uwineza, the Principal Hekima University College. Daktari, please come forward. Asante sana. Next will be Reverend Professor Patrick Monia, the Vice Chancellor, Tangaza University. Karibu sana. Thank you. Next will be Reverend Sister Professor Anafia Filipovic from the University of Zagreb in Croatia. Please come forward and pick your gift. Then on behalf of Reverend Professor Anthony Alaba, I will call upon Father Mbaru. Please come forward and receive the gift on behalf of Professor Anthony Alaba. I will now request the DVC to take a seat, and we welcome Dr. Cecilia Osianju to gift the remaining three. And Father Mbaru, you've been given?
It's by DVC.
That's by DVC, yeah. That is on behalf of Professor Anthony Alaba. So I think we will call upon so we can request Marcella. So I will call upon Dr. Fine, okay. So let me call upon Reverend Dr. Joseph Afulo from Hekima University College to receive the gift. Thank you. The next is Reverend Professor Christian Ngazain Ngelesa from Omnibus University, DR Congo. Karibu sana. Please feel welcome. And finally, I will welcome Sister Elizabeth Nduku from the Catholic University of Eastern Africa to come and receive her gift. So thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your contribution. Thank you, Professor Nduku. Asante sana. So thank you. Back to you, Father.
Yeah, thank you very much for that session. It was also a health break. And now we will try to follow the program as it is in the booklet. And what follows now is what we are calling the parallel sessions. If you look at the booklet, we have page number 3, we have 5 parallel sessions. And these parallel sessions, they are free. You decide which one you would like to attend. But I would like to ensure that the moderators are here. Sister Dr. Bibian Gundo, if you're here, could you stand? Sister Dr. Bibian. She's the moderator of University Education. She's here on your right, on my left. And the second group is Mission and Value of Catholic Education. We have the moderator is Reverend Professor Fabian Lonema. Professor Lonema is here at the center. You will be told where the groups are meeting shortly. And group number 3, we have Mission and Value of Catholic Education, which is in English language. We have Reverend Professor Richard Ruiza. Professor Ruiza is right behind on my left, on your right. The other group is number 4, Mission and Value of Catholic Education, moderated by Professor Anne Kanga. Professor Anne Kanga, the middle there, she is taking group number 4. And the last group, number 5, is Education for Hope for the Marginalized, and it will be moderated by Dr. Beatrice Churu. So all the moderators are here. May I request Dr. Gitonga to direct us where these rooms are? Please, come forward, briefly. Let's get the room, the direction, and where they are located. We start with room number 3, LLC.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 rooms on the upper side of the floor, and then the others are below. There's a stairs on the right, and the staircase on the left side of once you exit from each door. So we kindly request you, depending on the room you want to occupy. We have LRC room 3, they are actually labeled on the door. And we have ushers outside there also who will also guide you. So that's where Sister Bibiana Ngundo, Dr. Bibiana Ngundo will be, LRC room 3. Then we have the Value for Catholic Education, that's LRC room 5, which will be by Reverend Professor Richard Ruiza. Then we have Mission and Value of Catholic Education, that's a French language, which will be moderated by Fabian Lonema, that's LRC room 4. So we have LRC room 3 by Professor Ngundo, by Dr. Bibiana Ngundo. We have LRC room 4 by Professor Fabian Lonema. And then we have Mission Value and Catholic Education, that's English language, LRC room 5, and the moderator is Professor Richard Ruiza. And then we have Mission and Value of Catholic Education, that's LRC room 7, LRC room 7, and the moderator is Professor Anne Kanga, as called earlier. And then we have Education for Hope for the Marginalized, that's LRC room 6, and the moderator is Dr. Beatrice Churu. So the 5, 6, and 7 are on the lower floor, and then the 3 and 4 are on the upper floor. So you'll be guided. Immediately you leave, you exit the first and the second door at the auditorium. So I request that we take it up and pick the sessions once you are done with the tea break. Back to you, Father.
So the tea is ready, and we should be taking it within 14 minutes. So let's be in our rooms by 6 p.m. 6 p.m., please. After the sessions, we should be coming back here for the closing prayer. No. Thank you. Good. So I'm guided accordingly. After tea, we enter the rooms, wherever we are, for the discussion.